My childhood years, uh, I was totally oblivious of what was going on politically. I knew my father was in the House of Assembly, but they shielded us from the controversy that was swirling all around us. And so, growing up, we didn't have a car until 1960, and our life revolved around trips to the Fort Hill. Both grandparents lived on the Fort Hill, and of course, there was the Over the Hill community, and we were an integral part of that. I loved going to the Southern Public Library, St. Agnes Church. We rode our bicycles any and everywhere. And so it was a very good, happy life, and we really did not know what was going on. I do remember certain things that occurred, like there was a time when I was attending Christ Church Cathedral School, and I was removed from that school, and I went to another school. I was only about 4 or 5 at the time, but I remember being in a very dark place and not really liking where I went. And many decades later, I asked my mother, why was I removed from Christ Church School? And she said, your father was being tried for sedition, and the money dried up. And so that was one instance. And I'm trying to think. And of course, I remember the meetings. I remember going to Windsor Park, and I knew Marion Stewart, Labor's freedom fighter. I knew her very well. And I remember going to the House of Labor. And those meetings at the House of Labor, it was like going to, we used to call it a jumper church. And I remember the people would come running to Mom's office, which was in the House of Labor, and they would say, Miss Fawkes, any church tonight? So they referred to it as church. And growing up in an Anglican church, I never really had that kind of an experience that I observed at the House of Labor. When they prayed, they screamed, they hollered, they groaned, and they were asking God to deliver them. So for the labor movement, it was really a faith-based movement, and they were really praying to God for victory. I have no recollection of an election being called in '67. Life just went on in a normal manner. I remember Mom and Dad campaigning in many elections, going out to campaign. But on the day of January the 10th, I remember that vividly because at night there was great excitement. The Progressive Liberal Party got 18 votes, and so did the United Bahamian Party. And the following day we went to school. And when I came back from school, my mother told me that she got a call from Sir Rowland Simonet. I don't know if he was knighted at the time, but I'll refer to him as that. And she said, and you know what? Their office was in the House of Labor. And on one side of the main corridor was my mother's office, and directly opposite her office was my father's. So Sir Rowland called, and they exchanged pleasantries. And then he asked to speak to my father. So she tiptoed across and said, Sir Rowland is on the line. And when she got back into her office, she never hung up the telephone. And she was the witness when he said, name your terms. Yes. And then that night, I do recall, we knew that Sir Lyndon was coming to the house, and we were all gathered in the family room, which was kind of joined to the foyer area. And when he came, I recall my father introducing us to him, and then he escorted him into the library, and they had hushed discussions. And the following day, I think that was the day when he made it public that he would give his one vote to Sir Lyndon Pindling. And January 10th, oh my goodness, 1967 was one of the happiest years of my life. And this was one time in the country when the black people were united. It was a state of euphoria. Everybody was happy, even around the world. And so, and life changed for us. We came very quickly. I'd never had that kind of life before. So we grew up over the hill. And for me, it was a happy life, but an ordinary life. But suddenly, we started getting the royal treatment. And my father, while he didn't really discuss politics with us, he included us in his travels. The family traveled with him to New York. And I remember that trip very well. We lived at the Regency Hotel, and it was certainly very posh. But he went there to see if he could get Bahamians to come back to help and build the nation. And I think that P. Anthony White responded, and he came home. I don't know if any of the others came home. And we traveled to Exuma, the opening of Out Island Inn, and it was a different kind of life, and I was really very, very happy. Mm-hmm. And of course, even in the Bahamas, I remember a Supreme Court judge. He said that Bahamians, because when the sessions opened at a certain time in the year, there were no cases. And the Supreme Court judge said, Bahamians have given up sinning. One day, about a few months before she died, I remember her saying, if there hadn't been a Jacqueline Fawkes, there never would have been a Randall Fawkes. So I was rather stunned because this came out of nowhere. And then she said, he could not have done it without me. And so my father was a visionary. He put everything on the line when he engaged in battle, even the family, even the money that would keep us, sustained. And so my mother was the practical one. And I always told her, I said, Mother, sometimes with no financial resources, she was able to keep it going. Like when the general strike occurred, okay, everything was shut down and the people were not being paid. And he was writing all over the world, asking them to send funds to keep the people alive,
How long did that go on for?
For 19 days, yes. And so the sedition trial and the general strike, that is when there was no income in the Fawkes family, yes. And she recalls that she said the general strike was the most terrifying time of her life because she would be in the house and the phone would ring and they would say, is your house on fire? And then she would hear people running around the base of the house. And one night she was sitting in the house and Mrs. Olga Sherman Wilshkin, our next door neighbor, was sitting across the dining room table from her. And somebody took an ice pick and they threw it through the window and it went right between them. Yes, and so the general strike, their lives and our lives were on the line. And I understand we all came down with the measles at the same time. But that was a terrifying experience because they sent the soldiers, and the soldiers would stand on Bay Street 6 feet apart, and they had bayonets. And there was a piece of literature, I still have it, it says, be calm, stay calm. This is our supreme hour, because the people were talking about burning down Bay Street, but he knew one false move, and that could possibly be the end.
Obviously, there was a spiritual presence in all of this, obviously.
Yes, and I want to end on this note, and the note is that majority rule. I know people are still disillusioned in this country, but that was divinely orchestrated because, and I've never heard anybody put this interpretation on it, but had one of those political parties gained a majority, my father never would have been included. But the fact that there was a tie, the tie was orchestrated by God. And why? Because God meant for somebody who had been in the vanguard of the struggle to enter the finish line with the Progressive Liberal Party.